Meeting is being recorded.
But I do buy it.
There you go.
But not today.
Hey guys, see, I'm gonna start this all over again.
The Dr. Lecter.
Recorded.
Hey guys, I'm here today, and today is a special opportunity to interview. I am here with my dad's best friend, Pastor Bishop James Daniels. He and my dad he introduced my mom and my dad, so that's a huge thing. He is someone who has actually worked with civil rights from a remote standpoint as well as a hands-on standpoint. He and please forgive me, and Dr. Mendez, who is a professor, civil rights activist. He has actually worked beside Martin Luther King. He has met Malcolm X. He has roomed with Stokely Carmichael. They both have been very, very visible and active through, like I said, the civil rights era to today. And so what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about mental health and getting beyond certain issues, certain types of trauma or pathways to get beyond them. And these two gentlemen have phenomenal stories. The reason why I'm coming to you is because today, 1 in 5 persons in the U.S. lives with mental illness. That's 52.9 million people in 2020. According to the National Center for Education Scientists, 17% of individuals 18 to 24 years old are not either enrolled in school nor working at this time. Just a loss of purpose. These two gentlemen are going to talk about the phenomenal stories, phenomenal journeys with purpose. Despite everything that's going on around them, they were able to find opportunities to grow themselves as well as grow their communities. So thank you so much, Dr. Mendez, for joining. Thank you so much, Bishop Daniels, for joining me, and thank you for introducing my parents. Thank you. Once again, today, as I said, there are a lot of challenges that are here in the news about suicide and ideation. We hear about anxiety, but we also, as a teacher, hear more and more about kids just being disengaged and not involved, based on home life trauma, based on being misunderstood, etc. Did you ever encounter any of this growing up? Did you ever encounter those types of traumatic situations or feeling not being heard?
Oh, absolutely. As long as we've been in this country, in fact, let me put it this way, since 1619, when 20 Africans were dropped off in Jamestown, the trauma began there and has continued for over 100 years. The trauma is not inseparable from the attack on Black humanity. And the issue is always one of humanity, which is what why I got into mental health in the first place, because the nature of oppression, which is my fundamental starting point, is a dehumanizing system. And it's designed to keep you subordinate, submissive, and docile. But oppressed people cannot stay that way. Eventually, they're going to rebel, they're going to react in various ways. And it's important to understand what the fundamental woke up one morning and decided they wanted to be poor, they wanted to be oppressed, and they didn't feel like they had, that they were fully human. Those kinds of situations represent an imposition on oppressed people, particularly people of color. I've been blessed to touch down on every continent on earth. And I've seen the same situations whether or not I was in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, or even in Europe among working class and oppressed people. Dynamics are really the same.
And so when you see them, or when you've seen the situation, what does it do for you? Like, what are your thoughts?
What does it do?
When you see challenges, when you see opportunities, what does it do for you? Like, how does it impact your mindset? Are you looking at opportunities to come with solutions? Are you looking at, are you internalizing opportunities for you? Like,
no, I mean, the point is, I grew up in the 60s.
Okay.
And I was a product of Black Power when it finally hit, and I was a product of the Civil Rights Movement. So that even though there was much oppression, the South was segregated, the system of apartheid affected the whole country. But out of that grew a culture of both resistance and resilience. A lot of it was um, grew out of the African American church, Black church, on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's always been resistance. And I wasn't born with a Black consciousness, but being a part of that environment at that time when Black Power first emerged as such, in a matter of time, I developed a Black consciousness and felt like I had to be involved in the struggle for liberation for our people. So it was systemic in terms of the nature of oppression that made me want to be a part of the struggle that Dr. King and Malcolm X Snick and many others that were involved in the struggle. I got involved when I was a teenager, and I never let it go.
What made you get involved? What did you say?
I think that I got involved more or less from a point of looking at what society was offering. Dr. Mendez said it was always oppressed. Well, I looked at it also as the have and the have-nots, because people who don't have won't. And we have taught that if you have, then you're better than everything else and you can get above all of the problems. But I sat back and looked at it and I saw all the confusion in even the society where they had so much. They were still confused because you look for a new happening and it creates problems for everybody else. So I tried my best to look on the inside of people and see if I could help them to focus on making their lives better without having all of the have, and then not just go and aim at the have to make the have-nots feel better.
Yeah, yeah. And as a teacher, as an educator, I found that a lot of times my students, whether or not they had things materialistically, if they did not have that self-confidence, if they did not have that support at home, if they did not have the friends, the camaraderie, you could see an emptiness. Like even though they might get an A on their paper or they might make certain accomplishments, there was still a certain emptiness because they didn't have the support that was there, if that makes any sense. On the other hand, I see that a lot of students are empaths. Like they want to give, they want to support, they want to care, they want to nurture. They're very passionate about a cause, but they're very passionate about the cause in the moment. That might be a part of the emptiness. It's not necessarily the sustained passion, right? What's new, what's hot. How did you guys develop a sustained purpose? You know, that commitment.
I go back to understanding the culture
Right.
that emerged out of the nature of oppression. Everything that you mentioned and whatnot was part of the culture of resistance and resilience, which touched every aspect of our lives.
Yes.
So that the way I got involved was through my church. But then other people got involved through other entities. But the thing that brought us all together was the culture that emerged out of the fact that, for instance, Black bodies were considered an abomination. Any Black idea and thought was considered the base. The idea of Black advancement were blocked as such. Well, out of that emerged a culture that said nobody can hold you back, keep you down, or discourage you unless you let them. So our parents, our community, our church, all of that were empowered, not by the system, but by the mere fact that we affirmed our humanity at the same time we were being dehumanized.
You were affirming one another.
Yeah, let me give you a good example here as well, is that I knew about the Black Power thing, and I tried to work in the push operation. But then I met this man, almost named John Mendez. I saw the good. He looked at whatever situation he was working for to pull the good out of it for the whole of the African American people, if you will, or the Black people. And I wasn't as astute on those things as John was, so he brought me the information. I was in administration where we're supposed not to work for the union people that John Mendez was working for. And I put my career on the line to help him to do what I knew was the right thing to do. Now, if it was not right, ain't nowhere in the world, as much as I love John Mendez, that I walked out there with it. But he showed me the right in it. Somehow we've got to come to the grips with how do John Mendez show Jim Daniel the rights of a thing, and he has the ability to do it. I don't know how many people, Brother Mendez, that I know that have the ability to show someone that without just the argumentative side of it.
Yeah, but let me just piggyback that for a second. We have different roles.
Right.
We all have different roles. Everybody is not going to be the same or whatever, but the common thread that runs through it, we're all working for our liberation. He could be an administrator and still be part of the struggle. I couldn't be a part of the administration. I had to be in the field, as such. But throughout, there have been different roles. I was just in Birmingham, Alabama. I visited the Fred Shuttlesworth Civil Rights Museum. There are a lot of pictures in there of Gaston, who was one of the few Black millionaires in the country at that time, but he was a big supporter of Dr. King and Dr. Shuttlesworth and many others. He wasn't always out there in the streets boycotting and going to jail, but he had a role to play. And there are plenty Black folk who may not be involved in this, like Howard Thurman, the Black mystic. As such, he wasn't out there protesting, but he made protesters.
Yep.
I have a good friend who's a JAG, and I said to him, Terry, you're going to go out there and do the protesting with Black Lives Matters? He said, I'm an attorney. He said, why would I be out there protesting in the streets with Black Lives Matter? He said, I need to be the attorney that they call when people get arrested, and I help them get out of jail.
Right.
He said, we need to make lists when we do these things so that, somebody's bringing the water, somebody's the accountant, somebody's the attorney. There needs to be, as you said, different roles in the process. So you both were part of the civil rights movement, different roles. Mm-hmm. What do you see is different in the civil rights movement and Black Lives Matter?
Oh, Black Lives Matter is a continuation of all of our struggles, the young women that helped to organize and initiate Black Lives Matter, piggyback people like Ida B. Wells, Ella Baker, Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, Maya Angelou, and many others. they are an extension of that in this day and in this time under their conditions. I support them and certainly encourage more people to get involved in Black Lives Matter. So it's not a demarcation of any kind, but it is a continuation. And they're they have built on the backs of other folk that have struggled in previous generations.
Do you think it has the same momentum?
Yeah. When if you know, as a response to Trayvon Martin, Black Lives Matter mobilized folk across the globe, the world. People were marching in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, etc. So they've had tremendous support, as well as the movement itself. As it's very powerful. It's a powerful movement, and it's just like any other movement. Even with civil rights, it started at a level that was small, but the more the struggle continued, everybody got smarter. Dr. King got smarter. Where Dr. King was when he was assassinated was not the same Dr. King that started in '55. And the same thing with Malcolm. We could trace his evolution in terms of where he was at the end of where he died, who I think was a Pan-Africanist, compared to when he was initiated into the Nation of Islam. But what most people don't realize, Malcolm's mother and father were devout Garveyites. Father was a Marcus Garvey. Wow. And he lost that when his father died. Mother lost her mind, and he ended up, because of the trauma, he ended up in a life of crime. But what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did for him was to take him back to his Garvey roots.
One of the things that he's saying very clearly is that as the movement, as the things change, as our society change, we've got to have movements that's going to work into the area that need to be worked in, and we've got to support it.
What about the youth? How do you compare now to the civil rights movement? I mean, you guys obviously saw purpose in what you were doing. Do you think youth today see purpose? Do you think think they're empowered? What do you see, Bishop Daniels?
Okay, one of the things that I think that has happened to us is that our family structure has fallen apart so bad that it's unreal. When I say fallen apart, we don't talk to one another. At supper time or dinner time, a conversation was brought up that your mom and dad said something to it, and you listen to it. Even if you don't do exactly what they said, at least you have opportunity to listen to it. Now with them on Facebook and all else, they listen to everything else but what someone is constructively trying to help them to do better in. I don't say Facebook is wrong. I don't say any of the media stuff is wrong, but you gotta have, like Dr. Mendez and I, we caught on to each other by faith of God is what it really happened to. And we saw the good in each other and we clung to it. No matter what come up, he would be out there in some mess. I said, what in the world is he doing out there now? But I did not turn him loose. I ran to his rescue. And that's what we've got to, we've got to learn that from somewhere. I wish it was at home, but so many of our families has fallen apart. That's my point.
I think it's important to recognize that Black Lives Matter is youth.
Yes.
I attended the first march I attended, there were about 250,000 young people that were present. Asians, young whites, young Hispanics, Native people, as well as African Americans.
Dynamics change.
And I think sometimes we underestimate our young people. Yeah, we got all that other stuff going on over here, but let me give an example. And I'm back on culture now. I went to see the movie Black Panther.
Mhm.
And I was standing in line. There were two young teenagers in front of me, dressed in the African attire, had their hair braided really nice. And I was teasing them. I asked, "Who did your hair?" And one of the young ladies said, "I did." I said, "I don't believe it." And they were getting ready to kick my behind. And then I started.
No, they weren't, because Bishop Daniels was coming to get you. He had your back. Good.
Yeah, always had. But I started affirming them
Mhm.
and positively mirrored them.
Amen.
And I saw that pride rise. But look at one example of a positive movie. For the first time, we saw Africa
Mhm.
technologically strong,
Mhm.
scientifically strong. That's not what you see. Every time they show you Africa, it's a child crying, it's a giraffe running across the field,
Mhm.
and there's a war going on. But you never see the infrastructure of the big cities. I always tell people you could put Winston-Salem right in the middle of Nairobi, and there's still plenty left. I've lived in middle class condos and homes, and you never see that, which contributes to the dehumanization further and the inferiority complex that the system has imposed on Black people, turn them against themselves and make them participate in their own oppression.
Amen.
They continue to do that. And by not seeing Africa in terms of its development, in terms of its advancements,
I want you to
It's
go to
beauty.
Africa.
it's
I want you to go to
negative.
Africa. You look at our own environments now. Whatever African American community is shown is the downside of everything that's going on in there.
Yeah.
It's a program.
But culture is key.
Yes, sir.
Culture is key. And I want to continue to emphasize that.
I can't remember the name of the guy. You'll know the name of him. He's the one that does the genealogy test.
Oh, Gates.
Gates. I thought it was Gates. Okay.
Yeah.
So he did something. There was a community, it may have been Chicago or something, that had like a high dropout rate and just, high. He did was he took these youth and he gave them all their ancestry tests. I mean, did the swab, DNA swab,
Yeah.
and their perspective, their engagement, their everything in school changed dramatically. Dramatically. I wish I'll try to pull up that report. But basically what they were saying is these kids now had a sense of belonging because they knew what country they were from in Africa.
And
Identity and a new
Yep.
sense of purpose.
Mhm.
I remember my daughter was younger. She went to school in Bridgewater, New Jersey, and they were doing genealogy charts. And they said to my daughter, gotta know my daughter, they said, well, your chart needs to be Africa. She said, I'm not from Africa. Africa's a continent. I'm from a country. So we had to go through all the countries, as many as possible, to try and figure out which one she looked like, what she looked like, the skill sets, etc. And when she found, we wound up going with Côte d'Ivoire. I don't know why, but we wound up going with Côte d'Ivoire. But we had to go through, she went through all the different traits of the individuals in, the foods and etc. to say, hey, look, that's most like me. So that's probably the country that I'm from. And then she wound up becoming a great runner because, they said she looked like she was Ethiopian and, all this other kind of stuff. But the bottom line is it gave her a sense of belonging and a sense of identity. Looking at today's youth, and once again, like we said, that there's still a high rate of some mental health issues and mental health challenges. How do you think, because I know that growing up in the time period that you went through, people had to have gone through some challenges. How do you think getting involved and having a sense of purpose change some of them towards a positive direction?
Yeah, I mean, my own life is an example of that. But let me give you a quick story how I got involved in mental health. I got a call one day from a teacher who asked me to come to a class, talk to 3 brothers who were acting out. I told her I had the time, I would do it. I went to the school, she introduced me to the brothers, and they wanted to know whether or not I was that Reverend Mendez who had helped free Darryl Hunt, who was a young man falsely accused of murdering a white news reporter, and we knew he was innocent. Make a long story short, after 19 years, finally exonerated. I told them I was that Mendez, and said, let's go to a room, sit down and talk, etc. We went in and I was probing. In about 15 minutes, all 3 brothers broke down and started crying. One brother said, my daddy's in prison, I can't see him, and I want to see him. Other brother said, my mother's on crack, and I think she's gonna die. Third brother said, I want to join the gang so I could have a better sense of self-esteem. I screamed out in the moment, these guys are not bad, they're hurting.
Yes.
They're in pain, and nobody is speaking to their pain. That's when I decided, because I've always been a philosopher. I majored in philosophy when I was in college and grad school. That day, I went looking for a program in psychology. I ended up at Postgraduate Center of Mental Health in New York City. And then I went to the Institute of Contemporary Psychotherapy and Psychoanalysis. For what? To bring about a sense of healing. Because I realized I've been pastoring for a number of years, but I had not connected the dots in terms of the nature of oppression and how it shaped Black psychics as such. In other words, 350 years of slavery, 100 years of apartheid that ended legally in my life, but continues to exist
today.
That makes you sick.
Yes.
It should. It should make you sick.
It makes you sick. You can't help it. And sickness isn't so much, it doesn't mean you're crazy, but what it means is that we're still struggling to overcome inferiority complex. That's why when you put young people down, call them stupid and things like, you're reinforcing the inferiority complex. That, for me, why I went into mental health, is to bring about a sense of healing. And I go back to my thesis, moving people from being against themselves to being for themselves. That is not easy.
It is
Especially, and the last thing I'll say on this, the worst thing that slavery did to us was not the fact that it put chains on our hands and feet, because many of our folk were free, even though they had chains on them. But the worst thing was it taught us to hate ourselves.
Yes, sir.
That's the crime.
That's the crime.
Dehumanization. So a lot of our folks feel like to be human, they gotta be white. They have to hate their Blackness. They have to hate the fact that they are a person of color. And Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, even Dr. King, SNCC moved him to accept Black power. And in the last 2 years of his life, that's what he talked about, Black power and Black identity, etc. So it's an evolution, but the point is, I go back to what I said earlier, the fundamental starting point is oppression. You have to accept that. And that was my initial beginning and evolution in all of this, because of many things that happened to me. Last thing, and this is the most important thing because you keep coming back to it, intervention. We got to have a positive intervention. Three things that are necessary for stable human beings. One is you got to have positive mirroring. We're talking environment now. Secondly, people that you can idolize. Jim and I got along great because we could idolize each other. I felt safe with him. He felt safe with me. And we could calm each other down when we needed to. The third is like minds. Why did Jim get involved? He had already been involved. And it didn't take a lot of convincing to get him involved. He was involved already at a different level, in a different role, but we all came together culturally to support each other. But the aim was to liberate our people, and that's still going on.
I think
one of the things that's gotta happen is the people who are in leadership roles to try to get these people out of there. If you haven't been through anything yourself, you can't understand what the dynamic of the problem is. I was working for a beneficial finance company in New Jersey. Moved my family here to Durham, North Carolina. They said they had an opening in Raleigh for the position that I was in New Jersey. I went into the office and applied for the position. They said, you will have a position open, but not hopeful. I'm standing there with my family here, get hit in the face because I'm a
recorded.
So that I go up there, and when I walk into the room, they introduce, this is Miss Kelly Jones, it's the Mr. John Mendez, Jim Daniels, and about 15 people in the room, and I was Jim Daniels, the younger and older, when I walked in that room. You know, again, making me color. Went to the first office I was supposed to go to, and they told me that you got to go over to Portsmouth because the manager flew up to New Jersey because he didn't want to hire me. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff I went through. Go stay at the Y tonight. Go stay at the Y. You know, no money, just stay at the Y. So I knew one person there. I wanted to stay with them that night. Come back the next day at the time for my meeting. You got to go to Portsmouth. And I wasn't preaching then. I knew some words and I used them very, very clear.
There was some Saul before there was some Paul.
Yeah. So when I get over there, I'm sitting in the office and in the restaurant they sent me to, I'm the only one there, dressed, you know, necktie and all that stuff on. And guy come around the corner, you must be Jim Daniels. I said, blank, no, I'm Santa Claus with a suit on. I'm mad, really mad. And then he said, what I want you to do, Jim, I want you to work the color accounts. Let me tell you, I went off real nasty. See, that's the kind of stuff I went through. I looked around and the guy from New Jersey had flown down to the meeting. But when I got back in the office, they introduced everybody. I wrote the names down and I walked up to a lady one day and I called her Margaret. She jumped up and started screaming. The whole office stood up. The manager ran into the office. What's wrong? He called me Margaret. You know, he's supposed to call me Miss Watson. I think her last name was. And I said, let me tell you something before you speak, Bill. Your name is no longer Mr. Hunt, so your name is Bill until I'm Mr. Daniel. She said, I know, oh no, you Mr. I went through all of that.
Yeah, that's part of the dehumanization.
Right.
Because you're not.
Just tried to dismiss it to help them get to the next level.
And I've had some youth camp after school tutorial. I always include.
What does that mean?
In other words, they learned about their. A lot of the kids love to write poetry, and so we got them to interact.
Is being recorded.
So wait, you said the kids at your summer camp, some of the kids wrote poetry and you did what?
We get, I got a lot of people around the city to come. The first part of the day was exposing them to culture, their history and whatnot. Always had a theme each summer. This particular, let me pick one, economics. We took them to Wall Street.
Oh, wow.
In New York.
I want to go to your camp.
We took them to Wall Street. They rolled out the carpet for them.
Wow.
When the kids came back, a lot of them organized their own business because that's what the emphasis was during that summer. Some of the kids organized lemonade stands and whatever. I mean, it was small, but they made money. But more importantly, they understood the concept of business. Intervention.
You know what you were trying to do to them, Dr. Mendez? You break them reach on the inside of themselves to find out that there is good. And that's what our leaders don't do now.
Exactly.
They just come down on them rather than helping them to reach inside of themselves.
And all of these were kids from the hood. I lowered the price. I had parents paying a little here, a little there, because our kids don't have summer camps to go to.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure we had over 100 and something kids in those camps. I hired some college students to make sure that they have money to go back to school, buy clothes and things that they needed. And then I hired a number of junior counselors, training them in leadership. And we went years and years and years without a single incident.
Because guess what? You gave those youth purpose.
Yeah.
A lot of times kids just want to have purpose, you know.
Right. But they have it. You just got to bring it out of them.
Exactly right.
You see what I'm saying? I didn't look at these kids as if they did not matter. My job was, like, give you an example. And I after school tutorial, we had a young lady, I'm not going to call her name. I came into church one afternoon. She was so angry. And it broke my heart to see a little girl, 8, 9 years old, that angry. So I told, she had told one of the teacher blouses, you know, whatever. She was off the hook. And she said, I don't like you. you know, and I'm not coming back. I said, call her parents. They're up the street, let them come down and get her. They called, they would not come down to see about or get their little, I said, now I know what the problem is. I said, and this is answer to your question. I told her, I said, you know what your punishment is going to be for tearing Sister Pepper's dress? You coming back next week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you will be, I ain't coming back. Oh, yes, you will, even if I got to go get you. I put her with one of the older women in the church, and they connected. After about a month or so, the children acting just like the lady I put her with, particular school year, or I should, and I
Being recorded.
took them to a 5-star restaurant, and they were on their back. I didn't have to tell them to be on their behavior or whatever. They came dressed. First time I met the parents would never come down to the church with them. But I said, heck with that. You know, we're going to deal with intervention. After the opera was over, I asked them, now somebody tell me what the opera was about. That same little girl stood up on the van and told us what the opera was about. She was reading the words in English at the top of the stage, even though it was in Italian. Intervention. Intervention. You know, bring the best out of them that's in them. But you first, see, we got a lot of black folk, bourgeois black folk, who look down on black folk just as bad as white folk.
Now, wait, I'm gonna tell you something. So
You know.
you just said something. So I belong to a church in New Jersey that had we had the CFO and the CMO and the COO of like M&M's, Campbell Soup, major companies, and we also had, you know, people who were 10 kids, one parent, Section 8 housing, and everybody worked together. And I worked with the youth. And the youth used to go to my Bible study class, Sunday school class, etc. And so I was talking to a couple of kids from that, you know, from the higher echelon. And I asked them, I said, you know, why don't you guys come to, I mean, I had a great relationship with them, but why don't you guys come to Bible study class at night? And why don't you come to this program and that program? And they said, because Miss Jones, you know what? Everything they do in the church, they always talk about kids who don't have. And so because our parents do have, we're always meeting and sardines at night to put aside the money that she would eat for dinner, for chicken, so she could save her money to buy my cousin a fur coat because she never had a fur coat. And the point that I'm getting to is that sometimes there are people who have more that want to help, but because they're always categorized or demoralized, they're like, look, you know, I don't need to do that. I don't need to put my energies there because if I go there, I'm going to be ostracized or belittled. So you have some people who do want to help. But once again, like I said.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about people that become in bourgeois forget where they came from, and who, in order to be accepted or whatever, they gravitate toward white because white means to be human. What you're saying,
I hear what
let me
you're
finish,
saying.
let me finish, let me
Go
finish.
ahead, go ahead.
Okay, now, most of our churches are mixed. Many of them who didn't need the support that these other kids needed got involved and made the difference. They were the ones that were running the program. They were the ones that made the difference in the kid's life. I'm talking attitude, not so much um, bodily wise they're involved, because I taught that in my church. So you had the middle class people teaching Sunday school, teaching or the teachers, and older retired teachers running my youth camp as well. I mean, my after school tutorial program, as well as using mixed. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a church that was mixed.
Let me say this.
Because you know my mother. You know my mother.
I know all of you all. I know people. That's my gift. If you don't pick people who have the heart to do what we're telling you to do, you are wasting your time, your effort, and your energy. That's the reason some churches you get into, and they're doing all kinds of things, but trying to get into the heart of those people. But if you don't have the heart,
that's right. And they destroyed kids.
Yes.
I had a lady, I fired her, who was over my youth because she looked down on them, punished them, constantly discouraged them. And finally, the word got back to me what she was doing. At first, I warned her and her sister. They were both school teachers. But how they treated the white kids, entirely different how they treated. And I wasn't going to let anybody come in there and mistreat my kids.
Okay, so now I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had to get rid of them, but somebody else stepped in that loved the kids, cared for the kids, you know, and now they're adults. I bumped into them not too long ago at a Starbucks. They ran up to me. These are grown kids. I mean, grown people now. They got their own kids and hugged me. In fact, I got a good example for you. I bumped into Chris Paul yesterday, the basketball player, and
is he from Winston-Salem?
yeah, he was in my church.
Wow.
And he started telling me about, because he was in those youth programs. And he said, was telling his wife and his son what it meant to him and who I was and what I meant to them. Blew me away. I heard this guy calling me. I wasn't sure who it was. And I turned around. It was Chris Paul.
So one of the key things, would you say, Bishop Daniels, is making sure that kids are aligned with people who have the heart to help them?
If they don't,
I think
you are wasting your time. Any professional people that go in there and their heart is just geared on what they think they can just elevate it, they got to get on the inside of those people and feel what they feel. And if you can't get there, give up your job.
that's right.
Or if you can't get there, be willing to say, I can't do it. You know, don't fake it.
Yeah.
And that's a part of the challenge too, is that some people they've been
You don't
holding on
want
to their
everybody
position or they
working
want
with
the
your young
title.
people.
And old people either.
That's right. You don't want everybody working with your young people.
Yeah.
Everybody
because they
walking through
can't.
the situation can't handle it.
Exactly.
Right. And like I said, they need to be
And it
transparent
takes tolerance.
with themselves that they
The worst thing the school system has ever done to the kids is come up with a program that has no tolerance. You're dealing with youth. You're dealing with children. You anticipate crazy stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because you don't know what happened to them before they got to school.
Yeah, but
and keep in mind, they don't have control over a lot of it.
that's right. They don't.
So you know,
But
when they come to school,
every intervention that we ever did turn those kids around.
I love it.
But
Love it.
Dr.
Turn those
Mendez,
kids around. And it takes that intervention.
but
You know?
Dr. Mendez was doing, he was feeling the inside of the
No,
people.
you're
He
right.
wouldn't have never known to find those teachers that the children ain't the problem.
Exactly.
And if you can't, if
Because
you
that's
walk
what,
up to each other, we got to feel the inside
yeah,
of each
it
other.
was like the little girl. When I said you're going to be here next week, she's used to getting kicked out of everything.
Yes, yes, yes.
That freaked her out. When I said, no, you will be back here next week and the week after that and the week, are you coming? Yes, you are. If I got to come get you, you coming.
Okay.
That was the complete opposite of what she had been used to.
Mhm.
And they let her go.
Exactly.
She says, hey, I don't want to come back. Good. We're rid of you. But we watched that young girl turn around. Then she starts repeating and acting what she had been exposed to.
Mhm.
Would you say, Bishop Daniels, that one person at a time, or would you say it's a cluster, or what would you say? What would you say has helped to move people in your church or in your community? Because you're a bishop, so you've been in many different places, but in the communities that you worked in, what would you say has helped move people
I think
forward?
and I'll repeat what I said, is my ability to feel the inside of what's going on with other people. Everybody's got something different going on with you. Dr. Mendez said we were different individuals, praising our own direction, but inside of us, we had that rooted situation that we wanted to deal with, and that's how we are right today. We are rooted into a situation.
Did you ever try to make him more like you, or did you guys ever try to become more?
Look, you don't know how big a fool he was. You try if you want to. He had his mindset, but if you get around here, and one of the big words that I have not used, he used it one time. The biggest thing, you got to show love to a people. I showed love to that man, and he showed love to me in such a way you can't. Love is one thing you can't get around. People would try to knock it down, try to knock you down, but if you just show your love and you keep walking into that direction, they coming around.
But I come back to culture, because
Culture's a big.
it's a culture of resistance and a culture of resilience.
Yes.
You keep, asking about how do we get young people, how do we get anybody involved in this in the true sense they're born into it. How did you get involved in it? You see your role as a teacher, you see your role as a coach. That's not any different than somebody else who sees their role as an athlete working with young people. The goal is the same. We're trying to liberate minds as well as liberate bodies as such.
And it's ebb and flow.
Yeah.
I was in DC on an assignment, and I was talking to a gentleman. He has a son who's 19 years old, and his son has autism. And what he told me was, he said, there's just no hope. And I looked at him and I was like, there's always hope.
That's right.
And so I'm going to stereotype for a second. So he happened to be rather affluent. He had money, he explained the houses and the jets and all that kind of stuff he did in the large communities. And he happened to be Asian. And I'm thinking, like, God, all these resources that you have available to you, you really and truly believe there's no hope for your son? And so when I started to tell him about different things he had access to, and I showed him one of my websites, he was just like, thank you. And at that particular point in time, I said, God, I said I was going to walk away from autism, but you've shown me that there's still a need, because this man has, because for so many years, I tried to educate. So you got to realize, I've been working with autism since 1999. Wow. When my son Noah was in the womb, the doctors told me, they said to me, your son might be autistic. So really? We started doing sonograms to see if my son was going to be autistic. And when we did the sonogram, I said, well, why are we doing the sonogram? They said because there's 5 areas that the central nervous system or the brain stems control, and that's fine motor, gross motor, audio, visual, and cognition. If any of these brain stems are stented on the sonogram, then we will know that whether or not your child will potentially be autistic. Mm-hmm. When he was like 17 days old, I tried to wash him in one hand, like my ex-husband, and he slipped and fell. He wound up taking him to the hospital. They checked him again for the first thing they did was did an MRI, CAT scan, whatever, and his brain stems were fine. He was babbling, communicating, etc. So that let me know that brain stems have something to do with autism. So we were working on all kinds of methods to help with the central nervous system, not psychosis.
Right.
And my sons were doing well, when we moved to North Carolina and we started to move towards psychosis, we started to see a downward spiral. So I kept pushing neurological treatments, and I just got exhausted. I got exhausted because no one was listening. I kept getting the pushback, and I just got burnt out. I got burnt out. But when I heard that man, I heard that man say that, I just looked at him and I'm like, if I had just half the resources, half the family, the support, the anything, you know. And so I just said to him, you gotta have hope, because you have everything. You have everything. The only thing you're missing is hope. So that's when I started doing podcasts.
And if you got hope, you start looking for programs.